You work your land, you raise your children, you pray every single morning and every single night, and you never once break the rules of your church. And then you reach the end of that life, you lie down on your deathbed, surrounded by the people you love, and you still have no idea whether you are going to heaven or to hell. For hundreds of thousands of Amish people, that is not a nightmare. That is just the arrangement. Because in the most traditional Amish communities, there is one sentence you are never really supposed to say out loud. I know I am saved. So what does a whole lifetime of that kind of uncertainty actually do to a person? Let's get into it. To understand why an entire community would build its faith around not knowing, you first have to understand what they think knowing would cost them. Picture a plain white farmhouse at dawn in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. No power lines running to it, no car in the driveway, just a horse and buggy parked by the barn, and a family that has already been awake for an hour, working by the light of a gas lamp. The people inside that house believe in Jesus. They believe in heaven and hell. They read a Bible that would look familiar to a lot of you. But if you sat down with an old order Amish grandmother and gently asked her, "Do you know for sure you are going to heaven?" she would not say yes. And here is the part that surprises people. It is not because she doubts God. It is because to her, saying yes would be one of the most arrogant things a human being could possibly do. The Amish have a phrase for what they hope for instead. They call it a living hope. Not certainty. Hope. A quiet, patient trust that if they spend their whole life surrendered to God and to their church, then at the very end, God will look at that life and be merciful. Notice what that means, though. The verdict does not come now. It comes later, at death, and it belongs to God alone. Compare that to a lot of modern evangelical Christianity, where the whole point is that you can know right now, today, that you are saved and nothing can take it away. To the Amish, that is not confidence. That is presumption. It is a person doing God's job for him, standing in the judge's chair before the trial is even over. And there is a story Amish and ex-Amish tell that captures this perfectly. A very direct evangelical minister once cornered an Amish bishop and pressed him over and over. "Are you born again? Do you know for certain that you are saved?" And the bishop's answer was not a yes, and it was not a no. He said, roughly, "You are asking the wrong person." And then he offered to hand over a list of names, his neighbors, the people he had argued with, his sharpest critics. "Go ask them," he said, "whether I am saved. Let the people who watch how I actually live be the judges of that." Think about that for a second. His salvation was not something private he carried in his own heart. It was something the community around him could see, or fail to see, in how he treated them. And that idea did not come out of nowhere. It is almost 500 years old. Rewind to the 1500s, to Europe, to a movement called the Anabaptists. These were people who broke away during the Reformation with one radical demand: that faith had to be a real, adult, chosen thing, proven by how you lived, not just something you were baptized into as a baby. Their most famous leader, a former Catholic priest named Menno Simons, put it in a line the Amish still basically live by. He said, "True faith cannot lie dormant. It has to show itself. It feeds the hungry, it clothes the naked, it comforts the grieving." In other words, if your faith is real, people should be able to watch it working. But being an Anabaptist in the 1500s was dangerous. They were hunted, tortured, burned at the stake by the thousands. And this is the piece most people miss. The Amish still read about it. In many Amish homes, sitting right next to the Bible, there is a thick, heavy book called the Martyr's Mirror. over 1,000 pages of their ancestors being executed for their beliefs. There is a famous story in it about a man named Dirk Willems who escaped from prison across a frozen pond and then turned around and went back to save the guard who was chasing him and had fallen through the ice. They recaptured him, and they burned him alive anyway. That is the spiritual water the Amish swim in, a faith where the true church is not the one that wins, it is the one that suffers, that stays humble, that endures to the very end without ever getting comfortable or cocky. So when a modern person says, "Just believe and you are guaranteed heaven, easy done," you can maybe start to see why that lands so strangely on an Amish ear. Nothing in their history was ever easy or guaranteed. And there is a word underneath all of this. A word that is honestly the key to the entire Amish way of life. Gelassenheit. It is hard to translate cleanly, but it means something like yieldedness. Giving yourself up. Surrendering your own will, your own ego, your own wants to God and to the community. In Pennsylvania Dutch, they sometimes just call it giving up. And once you understand Gelassenheit, the whole no assurance thing suddenly clicks into place. Because standing up and declaring, "I am saved, I know it, I am one of God's chosen," is, to the Amish, the exact opposite of yielding. It is the self shouting. It is the ego planting a flag. It is pride wearing a Sunday hat. And pride, in their world, is the most dangerous thing there is. You see it everywhere in Amish culture once you know to look. The plain clothes, so no one stands out. The refusal to be photographed. The dolls they make for their children that have no faces, because a face might make one child feel more special than another. All of it is a daily war against pride and claiming you have got your salvation locked in. That would be the biggest act of pride of all. Which brings us to the rules. The Ordnung. This is the unwritten code that governs Amish life, everything from the width of a hat brim to whether you can have a phone and where. And here is where outsiders, especially evangelical outsiders, get the Amish completely wrong. People look at all those rules and assume the Amish think they are earning their way into heaven, checking boxes, racking up points with God. The Amish themselves say that is not it at all. They will tell you salvation is a gift, unearned, given by grace. The rules are not the payment. The rules are the evidence. Living faithfully, obeying the Ordnung, staying humble and yielded, is supposed to be the visible proof that grace is actually working in you. It is the fruit, not the price. Scholars who have spent their careers with the Amish, people like Donald Crable at Elizabethtown College, push back hard on the lazy, the Amish believe in works salvation take. They say it takes a whole foreign theology and jams it onto a people it was never meant to describe. Okay, so that is the belief, and where it comes from, and why it makes a kind of internal sense. Now for the harder question, the one this whole video is actually about. What does it do to you? What is it like to carry that every day, from childhood to your last breath? And I want to be really careful and really honest here, because this is where it would be easy to sensationalize, and I do not want to do that. There is no solid research proving the Amish as a whole are more anxious or more depressed than anyone else. The good studies on Amish mental health are genuinely limited, and the best review of them basically says, "Be humble, we do not have clean answers." So I am not going to stand here and tell you the Amish are secretly miserable. Many are not. We will get to that. But I can tell you what it does to some people, because some of them left and they wrote it all down. There is a whole shelf of memoirs now by people who grew up Amish and walked away, and a theme runs through a lot of them like a thread. Fear. Not fear of the outside world or fear of getting caught. Fear for their eternal soul. Psychologists actually have a name for the more extreme version of this: religious scrupulosity. It is considered a form of obsessive-compulsive disorder, and the shorthand for it is haunting. It is fearing sin where there is none. Imagine being terrified you have offended God when you have not done anything wrong. Imagine praying the same prayer over and over because you are not sure the last one counted. Imagine being a child, and the fear that gets planted deepest of all is the fear of hell, so that every small decision starts to feel like it might tip the scales on where you spend forever. Therapists who work with people from high-control religious backgrounds describe the same core wound over and over. You are taught not to trust yourself, not your gut, not your feelings, only the external authorities. And when you cannot trust yourself, certainty about anything, including your own soul, becomes almost impossible. Which brings us to a man named Ira Wagler. Ira grew up deep in the Amish world. His own father founded and edited one of the most respected magazines in Amish life, so this was not some broken family on the fringes. This was Amish royalty, basically. And in his memoir, Growing Up Amish, Ira describes leaving in the middle of the night at 17 years old, sneaking out at 2 in the morning with about $150 stuffed in a black duffel bag. But here is the detail that stays with you. He did not just leave once. He left and he came back, and left and came back, again and again, for years. And a huge part of what kept dragging him back was not homesickness. It was terror. He was, in his own words, genuinely afraid of losing his salvation. He described the God he grew up with as a kind of dark, frowning force. He wrote that the box of Amish life could give you some protection, but it could never actually give you salvation, which means you could do everything right and still not be safe. Sit with that. You could obey every rule and still lie awake at night unsure if it was enough. If you're finding this as fascinating and as human as I do, take a second and hit subscribe, because I dig into stories like this every single week. Now, back to it, because Ira's story is not the only one, and the next voice is even more careful about being fair. Her name is Saloma Miller Furlong, and she left the Amish, got dragged back by a van load of relatives, including a bishop, and then finally left for good. She has since written several books and appeared in the big PBS documentaries about the Amish. And what makes Saloma so valuable is that she refuses to make it a cartoon. She is careful to say there are well-adjusted, loving Amish families, that a lot of her own pain came from a specific dysfunctional home with a mentally ill father, not from the whole culture. But even she describes the crushing weight of one particular belief. When you leave the Amish, the teaching in many communities is that you have just thrown away your only hope of salvation. So leaving is not just leaving your family and your language and the only life you have ever known. Saloma describes having to weigh some unknown number of happier years out in the world against the possibility of eternal damnation. That is the actual math a person is doing in their head at the kitchen table. Happiness now versus hell forever. And she also said something quietly devastating about what it took to be a good Amish person. You really have to be able to not ask questions. Then there is Emma Gingerich, who left an extremely strict community in Missouri at 18, one of 14 children, leaving nothing but a note for her parents. Years later, her father still had not forgiven her. She describes being raised with rules but no explanations, with religion but no reasons. Just do it and do not ask why. And there is Tora Bontrager, who escaped in the middle of the night at 15 with $170, later graduated from Columbia University, and describes being branded a traitor, someone destined for hell, for the crime of wanting a different life. Now, this is where I have to slow down and add the other side, because if all you take from those stories is the Amish are cruel, you have missed it. That teaching, the shunning, the idea that leavers are lost, is real. But the Amish do not experience it the way it sounds to us. The shunning has two parts: the ban, which is being put out of the church, and the meidung, the social shunning that follows. And to the Amish, this is not hatred. In their minds, it is love. A desperate, last resort kind of love. The idea is that by refusing normal contact, they might make the wayward person so uncomfortable that they come home, back to the church, back to safety, back to their only shot at heaven. The pain is the point, but the goal is rescue, not punishment. And it varies enormously. Some communities barely shun at all if you go join a plainer Mennonite church instead. Some impose a short version. And when a bishop named Sam Mullet in Ohio took shunning to a violent, abusive extreme, other Amish leaders were horrified and rejected it. So please do not picture one uniform, brutal system. It is a spectrum, and most of the people inside it genuinely believe they are trying to save the souls they love, which somehow makes the whole thing sadder and more human at the same time. But here is the moment where all of this stops being abstract. The moment where a lifetime of living hope instead of certainty gets tested for real. The deathbed. Go to an Amish funeral, and you will notice something is missing. There is no eulogy. Nobody stands up to give a speech about what a wonderful person the deceased was. The sermon is not really about them at all. It is about God, and often it circles all the way back to the story of creation. And you will not hear the thing you hear at almost every other funeral in America. Nobody stands up and promises that Grandpa is in a better place now. Because, in their theology, who are they to say? That verdict belongs to God. All they have is the hope. There is one heartbreaking exception. When a child dies, the Amish do believe, with real conviction, that the child is safe, taken straight into God's hands. It is only once you are old enough to choose, old enough to yield or refuse to yield, that the uncertainty begins. And I do not want to leave you thinking this is all dread, because it is not. There is a woodworker named Sam Stoltzfus who was once asked about death, and his answer might reframe this entire thing for you. He said that to the Amish, a funeral is actually more important than a birthday because they believe in what comes after. And the people who have passed, he said, are better off now than the rest of us who are still here. Not fear, not despair. A calm, quiet confidence that they had done their best and the rest was in hands far bigger than their own. Because that is the twist in this whole story. For a lot of Amish people, not knowing is not a torture at all. It is a relief. Think about the rest of us for a second. So many people out here are exhausted from trying to control everything, trying to be certain, trying to guarantee outcomes, trying to nail down the future and their finances and their legacy and, yeah, their eternity too. The Amish just do not do that. They hand it over. Craybill, the scholar, put it in a way that honestly stops you cold. He said that where a lot of Christians want to know and control and plan and guarantee their salvation, the Amish outlook is more modest and maybe, he said, more honest. More honest. Because none of us actually knows what happens next. The Amish just refuse to pretend that they do. And out of that refusal comes this deep, almost enviable calm. They do not lie awake trying to earn a certainty no human can really have. They live their day, they do their work, they love their people, and they leave the verdict to God. For a great many of them, that is not a cage. It is the most peace they could imagine. So which is it? A source of quiet, lifelong fear, or a source of profound freedom? And the frustrating human answer is that it is both. And which one you get seems to depend a lot on which Amish you are even talking about. Because the Amish are not one thing. Picture a spectrum. On the strictest end, you have groups like the Schwarzentruber Amish, who lean hardest into that uncertainty, that never quite safe humility. In the big middle, you have the mainstream Old Order Amish, the horse and buggy families most people picture, holding to the living hope. But then something interesting happens further along. You reach the New Order Amish, who formed in the 1960s, still plain, still horse and buggy, but who actually do teach assurance of salvation and being born again, influenced by revival movements that swept through in the mid-20th century. And further still, the beachy Amish, who drive cars and use electricity and preach assurance openly. So the line between you cannot know and you can know does not run around the Amish world. It runs straight through the middle of it. And here is the detail that flips the whole story on its head. Remember all those people who got shunned for leaving? There are also people who got shunned for the opposite, for staying, but coming to believe, quietly, that they were saved and they knew it. In some Old Order communities, a person announcing, "I have assurance of my salvation," has been treated as a heretic and pushed out. Not for leaving the faith, for being too sure of it. Which tells you this was never really just about rules, or heaven, or hell. It was about a way of seeing the human being, as someone small and humble and not entitled to certainty. Someone who yields. So, after all of this, what does a belief like this actually do to a person? For some, it plants a fear that follows them out the door and haunts them for decades, a fear they only escape by leaving everything behind. For others, that very same belief is the thing that lets them sleep at night. It frees them from the exhausting modern job of being certain about the one thing no human can be certain about. And maybe the real question this leaves us with is not about the Amish at all. Maybe it is about us. We spend so much of our lives chasing certainty on everything, demanding to know how the story ends. The Amish decided, 500 years ago, to just stop demanding that. To live a good life, love the people in front of them, and leave the ending unwritten. The question is whether that is the most frightening way to live, or the bravest. If this pulled you in, subscribe and stick around, because there is a whole hidden world inside these communities that almost nobody on the outside ever gets to see, and I am just getting started.